Hello, and welcome to The Diverse Bookshelf with me, Samia Aziz. On this show, I interview incredible authors doing a deep dive into important themes and issues while talking all things books. On this week's episode, I'm speaking with Taiba Bajar, researcher, brain health trainer, and coach for parents with children with autism. We're talking all about her book, Unlock Autism, and her unique 7-step action plan to unlock a child's potential within 12 months. We talk about the power of the brain, its neuroplasticity, and the ability to rewire the brain and what this can mean. Taiba shares her experiences of finding out her son is autistic, while also receiving a diagnosis for autism and dyspraxia in adulthood herself. We talk about how autism is treated in the UK healthcare system and within the South Asian community too. Taiba Bajar is an award-winning researcher and licensed brain health trainer. With a seasoned background as a corporate professional and parent coach, she holds 2 science degrees from the University of Bristol with a background in neuroscience. Taiba founded Autism Brain Empowerment, a successful parent coaching business following her journey as a parent to her autistic son. Drawing from her professional expertise and personal experiences, Taiba equips parents to guide their children in reducing autism symptoms, unlocking their potential, and fostering their leadership in the world. I'm so glad she's my guest today. Taiba, welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf podcast. It's so lovely to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum, Samia. Alhamdulillah, I'm well. Yeah, I'm all good. Just busy with book promo stuff and like family stuff, but thankfully enjoying the lovely weather we're having at the moment too. So that just makes the whole day better.
And we're here today actually to talk about your first book, which is called Unlock Autism, 7-step autism action plan to unlock your child's potential within 12 months. Really very like focused subtitle you've got going on there. But obviously it is about understanding autism and some of the changes, and you've given a 7-step plan that can really help especially parents when it comes to supporting their child who has had an autism diagnosis or who they perhaps suspect may be on the autistic spectrum. So let's talk a little bit about your journey up until now. What led you to write this book?
Okay, my son, I've got a boy and a girl. My son, when he was about 20 months old, he had an autism regression. So about 40% of children who have autism have a skills regression where they lose skills they previously had. So up until 20 months, my son he was a bit fussy with food and a few other things, but you couldn't say he has autism. Like he had eye contact and things like that. But as soon as he hit 20 months, it was a sudden thing. About over a month, he lost the ability to name his colors. He lost the ability to say words that he had. He was feeding himself. So 18 months old, we had videos of him feeding himself. Then he lost that ability. He lost eye contact. And it just happened so rapidly over a month that you can't believe it's happened. You think, oh, it's a week. Oh, it's 2 weeks. Oh, why hasn't he got back to normal? That happened, and it was a really hard time. And it coincided with the lockdown as well in 2020. And that's like a little bit normal. Like autistic children who have a skills regression, it's between 18 months to 36 months. They have this rapid regression in skills. So it was a really isolating time as well. And as we were reopening from the lockdown, basically I had a lot of like family and friends just say, we think he has autism, he needs help. And I could tell that he needed help. I went to my GP, I went to the healthcare visitor, and the GP kind of brushed us off. Oh, he's too young. He might just be a little bit late developer. Didn't really take anything seriously, especially the loss of skills that we saw as parents. And then the health visitor did take us seriously. And then she, but it was over Zoom because it was 2020. And she made all the appropriate referrals for speech and language, physio, OT, dietitian, portage, everything. And which was like, wow, thankfully someone's going to help us. We're going to get help now. And Samia, you might remember, I used to be a dentist. Do you remember that? Yeah. So when you're studying dentistry, you learn a lot about neuroscience. And you know a lot about brain development, and a child's brain develops rapidly up until the age of 5. So 75% of their brain is developed by the age of 3, 90% is developed by the age of 5. And I knew that from dental school. And so I thought, okay, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm going to get early intervention and we're going to change things for him. And then in the first appointment I had with his physio, because he had a gross motor delay now as well. So he used to be able to get up from the floor properly, but now he was an early walker. And then he wasn't able to jump, and he was like waddling off the floor. So he'd lost that skill. So it was really a horrible time for us parents. And then I felt like after waiting about 2 or 3 months on the waiting list for the first physio appointment, we had the first physio appointment, and I felt all she was trying to do was tell us what to expect for the rest of his life. So there was no about, oh, we can change things for him. Well done for presenting early. We're gonna change things now, and he's gonna be able to do this and that and this and that again. So I was like, he explaining the story, and then she was just managing my expectations. Like, yes, autistic children do struggle with sound. Yes, he is likely to have this for the rest of his life. Yes, he is. I felt like she wasn't really helping us. She was more about trying to pacify me and trying to manage my expectations from him. There was no talk about changing anything for him. And then at the end of the appointment, she was like, okay, I will come see you, or I'll come see your son for 30 minutes every 8 weeks. So I knew all about NHS. The NHS is really overstretched. There's waiting lists, and that waiting list has got even bigger after COVID. And I just realized there and then that these people are not going to help me. These people are not going to help my son. And they didn't care enough, and they weren't going to do enough. So then I just realized there and then I have to help him. So then I just stopped relying on the NHS or his school. So at the time he was going to nursery, which didn't close in the pandemic, only in the first lockdown, didn't close in the second and third one. So he was still going to nursery, and they had loads of concerns. But I just realized these people, they weren't going to help me, and I had to help myself. So that's where I created it. So then I went on like a research journey, and I was like always a bit of a research queen. At university, I won the clinical research prize as well in our year for the independent research project I did. And so I was like, I knew I can do that. And I knew a lot about the brain and about neuroplasticity. So I just thought, okay, if I just work really hard and I learn about the biological reasons, like the biological causes of autism, then if I reverse that, then he won't have these symptoms anymore. And that led me on that journey. And then he started making great progress. And so that just thought, and I started advising loads of people. So I started advising loads of friends with autistic kids. They'd start sending me videos of their kids. And then I just decided that people don't seem to know this information. So I wrote a book. That's what happened.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I can only imagine to hear from a healthcare provider that, oh, we'll see you every 8 weeks for 30 minutes, when you've seen such a rapid sort of loss of skills in your son over a period of just 4 weeks. To imagine if you're going to leave us for 8 weeks, what could happen in that time, like how much we could further regress or stop making progress. And I guess like that's the problem, is that you were not getting the constant support that you needed, and you became the source of support that your child needs.
I don't think it was just that. I think they had no hope for my child. They had no hope for my child, and they didn't want me to have any hope for him.
Yeah.
But where I knew about neuroplasticity and brain development, he wasn't yet 3, he wasn't yet 5. We can change things. But it was like they hadn't been trained in neuroplasticity, or if they had, they didn't want to help me with it. So they didn't tell me about it. So there was no hope from them.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And you do write in the book about this idea of how a diagnosis can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you give somebody a label, they have in mind, because of society or whatever it may be, an idea as to how limiting that can be. And then instead of like still trying to do what they want to do and live the life that they want to live, to tell themselves that because I have X, Y, and Z, because I'm autistic or whatever it may be, I can't do this thing, or I will never be able to do this, or I'll never be able to live this kind of life. But I guess, and that's very limiting. But what do you think it is in your experience about autism that even like the NHS and doctors in general just don't know about, or what is it about it that they just don't seem to get?
Okay, so I think that's a really good question. I think, like, I've got loads of friends who are doctors because I went to dental school, got loads of friends who are medics, and they will tell me from the beginning, like from day one, that I know more about autism than they do, because they're not really given the training much about training about autism from medical school. So it's not really in the curriculum, just like how it's not really in the curriculum for them to spot skin cancer on brown skin or black skin. It's not really, or like a heart attack for women, the symptoms are different compared to a heart attack for men. And that's not in their curriculum either. So there's a lot of limitations. And then the biggest thing, I think you get a lot of, within autism, the narrative in society and by the GP, because GP is a part of society as well, is that autism is something your child is born with and it will be like that forever. There's no talk about actually being able to change things. They have anxiety. We can make that go away so they feel better everywhere. They have a sensory overwhelm. We can change that. There's things you can do to change it. So it's very unempowering. Unempowering. And then the whole narrative of what neuroplasticity means, which means you can rewire your brain, which if you just change the inputs to that person, if you change the inputs to that child or the adult, you will change things for them and you're rewiring their brain. There's no real acknowledgement of that possibility. So I think either they haven't been trained in it because of a lack of funding and resources towards it, which is like propel it list, or if they know about it, it's not on the NHS clinical guidelines, so they can't really talk much about it. So yeah.
So I remember I studied psychology as part of my degree, and I had a unit of developmental psychology, and we looked into autism. And I just remember even at the time thinking that it was very small, like it was a very small unit. And a lot of what we were talking about was talking about how there isn't enough research, and also that early theories of autism were actually really terrible. Wasn't there was this idea of the refrigerator mother, that it was
that's true. That is a terrible one. That's a terrible one.
That's one of the early theories. So if that's what we're starting with, which is the idea that a child develops autistic symptoms because the mother is not loving, if what we're starting with, it's not surprising really to think that we haven't moved too far from that, unfortunately, and that the right sort of thinking or the right sort of ideas are prevalent in society at the moment. I think it is. I'm really glad to see that it is changing a little bit, definitely, like with books of their own, but even in like mainstream representation in films and on TV, there is more conversation about it. There are people telling their own stories, which is really positive. And I think in this age of social media, which has given people a platform that 20, 30 years ago they didn't have. But you write in the book that you yourself received, you were told that you're autistic, but that was like within your like mid-20s. How do you think things may have been different if you had known early on?
I think, because I write in the book that when I was 23, I was given a diagnosis of autism and I was given a diagnosis of dyspraxia at the age of 23. And then when someone tells you that, suddenly you realize, oh, so that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. That's why I always struggled with this. That's why I'm like this. But I think if I received it earlier, I probably would have leaned into it more, because people lean into their labels. And I would have, since receiving my diagnosis of dyspraxia, I've always enjoyed Bollywood dancing. And then as sisters, we would do practice choreographed dances. And then as soon as I realized I have dyspraxia, and I was like, oh, this is why my sisters are so much better than me. But then I got it in my head that there's no way I'll get better. Like, oh, so I'm just like this, so I'll just leave it like this. But then when it came to my son, I was like, because I think what I did is I lacked a lot of self-love. So I lacked a lot of self-love to change things for myself. But when you're a parent, you're so connected to your child. You're so connected. And then it's just heartbreak every single day when your child is not making eye contact, or they're constantly wetting themselves, or they can't talk. They can't tell you how they're feeling. And then you send them somewhere like nursery, and other children are coming back and they're saying this happened, and then your child literally doesn't have the words to tell you. So you could either choose to live with that heartbreak, which I couldn't do, because I think as a parent, you just have dreams for your child.
Yeah.
You have dreams for your child. And then, so I just couldn't. So out of my love for him, I made the 7-step autism action plan, and alhamdulillah, it worked, turned things around for him so well, mashallah. But I think when I did that, I was like, wow, this could work for everyone. Why didn't I do it for myself? But I think it's because I lack the self-love to do it for myself.
Yeah. And also drive as well. You talk this idea of being so connected to your child, but I think also as a parent, you want to know that you've done everything you possibly did.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot about adults, but when it comes to ourselves, we're just like, oh, it doesn't really matter. But like for people that we love, we give a lot more, and that drive is there. But also maybe if you are a bit younger, maybe you would have felt differently. We don't know even about yourself. But I think at that point, you'd also achieved so much by the time you were 23.
Yeah, but to tell you what, it's all different. It's all different. I achieved so much, but I also had so many self-imposed limitations as well. So like I told myself, you are good at this, so do this. You are bad at this, so do that. Then only when I've overcome things like that have I made myself do things like start a business or write a book. So it really has been like a huge journey of being able to break these labels I put on myself and restrictions I put on myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it came to putting together this 7-step plan, 7-step action plan, what was the process like for you in terms of being sure that these are the things that are going to be part of this plan?
Okay, so I went into really big research mode. So what I focused my research on, so I went on PubMed and then looked at scientific papers, but what I focused my research on, like, what's actually causing autism? Because in my head, I was like, oh, he can't have been born with it because he had a rapid loss of skills. So it's something that's like a switch that turned on. So there's something there about that. So I was more focused on the causes of autism. And then when I learned about that, it just fell into something called the 7-step autism action plan. But originally it was just like learning about gut health, learning about environmental toxins, learning about methylation, the size of the cerebellum, things like that. And then I turned it into a logical action plan for parents to do at home. That's how it worked out.
Yeah. So you tell us that autism is not just genetic, it's called
Epigenetic.
Which means that although there is like a genetic component, it is triggered or worsened or impacted or completely or the opposite, completely managed by one's environment, which 100%. Is fascinating. And I think that actually, like, I guess to some degree, a lot of genetic issues must be impacted by the environment, which is why often we say, oh, if I lived in a warmer climate, I'm sure I would feel better. And different disabilities even and illnesses and issues surface differently in different parts of the world and in different environments.
Yeah.
And so you talk about really changing the environment of a child. So from what they're eating to what they're consuming in terms of like screen time and play, but the kind of environment in the home, physically, air quality, air fresheners and deodorants. All of this. It's a lot of things. What have you found to be like amongst the most challenging changes to make?
I think originally my son did not eat properly. He didn't eat properly at all. So he was very skinny. So he was always a slim child, like he was born on a 25th percentile. And then in the worst of his symptoms, he would only eat one bite of food every 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
And he lost so much weight. He became so skinny. Yeah, became so skinny. And like he was wearing clothes that were a couple of sizes younger than him. And everyone just sat with so much judgment. Oh, he's I don't know, 2 years old. Why is he still wearing 9 to 12-month trousers? But he was just so skinny. And so I think the biggest change was expanding his diet. And also it was a big change as a family to go from thinking a takeaway is okay, or to even like a chicken takeaway is okay, to actually it's something called ultra high processed foods. and it's terrible for the gut microbiome. And autistic children are more vulnerable to certain things. So that was I think changing, because we eat food every single day and our social activities are dictated by food, part of our daily routine. So I think that's the biggest one to change. But it is such a game changer for my son and then for lots of the kids I work with.
Yeah. So I do know that a lot of autistic children struggle with food. What exactly is it about food that makes it so hard for children? Because I know autistic children, some of them just refuse to eat certain food. They have a very limited palate. They have, I guess, like a fixation on certain types of food, and it has to be like, not if it's say like I don't know, like some bread, it has to be like a certain brand in a sense. Like, what
Should I
is
tell
it
you what
about?
it is? I tell you what it is. There's the biggest game changer, which came to my son and with other people I know as well, is it's their anxiety. So autistic children, they are more in the fight, flight, and freeze modes. But so they're more in their sympathetic rather than their parasympathetic nervous system. So they're always like in that fight, flight, and freeze. So with a certain brand of bread, they are generally like, if you get a different type of brand, they're so anxious to try it. So I'm working with another family where they said that I was like, what do you think is the cause of their food aversion? Is it this and this? And they were like, I think it's anxiety, because we can blend a pear in their food and they're okay with it. But if we give them a pear, they're like, what is this? Because they're so anxious. But there's loads of tests you can do. So part of my 7-step autism action plan, in step 2, break down blood, it's actually expanded in the accompanying e-bundle. But there's like a nervous system test that I talk about, and you can test the nervous system. So actually with my own son, what it was, I always felt like his sleep was really poor, and his food was poor, and his appetite was poor. Like he didn't really eat much. Like he had a restricted diet. Once I got his nervous system tested privately, like a genetic test, it worked out that where I said his sleep was poor, the sleep cycle was completely fine. So naturally, people feel more awake in the morning, and then as the evening comes around, you feel a bit more tired, and then you go to sleep. So that like hormones in his body is all working completely fine. So there's actually nothing, though at the time there was actually nothing wrong with his sleep. What the problem was, his anxiety levels. So his anxiety levels were so high that was causing he didn't want to go to sleep, and that aversion to new foods. So when I did as part of the e-bundle, it talks about the like a nervous system test that you can do, and in his body, the adrenaline molecule, the enzyme to break that down, isn't working properly. So the adrenaline in his body is in his body for a lot longer than the average person, because that enzyme's not working properly. So since then, like we give him, so there's a supplement that was got recommended, and since then he does not have the anxiety anymore. Honestly, it's like something we were all living with him, where he'd get scared really easily or anxious really easily, and then he would also stay like that for a long time, like 20 minutes after, 2 hours after. But then once we just fixed that one thing, then that the adrenaline can just get broken down. So I hope that's like simple and straightforward to understand. But that was the real game changer for him once we did that test, and which we did privately, and it's part of my program as well. We were able to fix his anxiety around new foods. So that really expanded his palate.
That's so fascinating, because I guess it's important to understand that if autism is something that is genetic, that means that there is something going on in the body which is different to somebody that does not have autism.
Yeah.
And causing different things, and also is impacted by the environment as well. And I think, like you write in the book, about the importance of understanding the different things that are going on within the body. Even you say like one of the first things to do is to get a full blood test and understand whether there are any deficiencies in vitamins or minerals or blood, or whatever it may be. And I mean, I just thinking, even just that about myself, like I know I can now tell when my vitamin D has gone too low. I can tell when my iron is low, because I can tell the impact that it has on my sleep, on my energy levels, on how I'm feeling about food. And just tweaking those things can make such a big difference. So I think, like, just to make sure that, I guess what you tell us is that it's not it's not like a one thing. It's not like a one solution that's going to make everything better. There's lots of things going on. And actually, like, one of the things I felt reading your book and reading through the action plan is just how much there is to think about and how much there is to do. So how has it been for you, I guess, like managing all of these different things and also your own anxiety around that? And how do you, I guess, have like grace for yourself as well? Because maybe it's not possible to do all of these things all at once.
Yeah. I think as a parent, I do put a lot of pressure on myself. I've always had that. I've always felt like that to do something. I think when I know something, I have to do it. I can't just ignore it and be in bliss. So I've always been really action orientated and I always push myself. And that's like a lot of self-imposed pressure. So I have developed techniques to like forgive times when I don't do that. But you're right, there was a lot to do. But I think if you have the motivation, that saying where you make time for the things that you want to do. Like if you want to exercise, or if you want to do something, you would, or if you want to see your friend, you would make time to do it if you think it's important. So I think it was like that for me. It was just a matter of, he was my number one priority. And where I felt like I was on a deadline because of the childhood, the way the brain develops, and the earlier you treat it, the faster it is. So I think it was more like that as well. And a lot of it was also about identity. Like my mum said this thing as well. She was like, children don't really remember things before the age of 5. So if you are able to like change things for him, so that by the age of 5, he's got loads of friends, he's meeting his milestones, he can run, he can jump, he's with the other children, he will never realize that you were so worried at one point.
Yeah, that's true.
So when my mum said to me, that was like a lot of motivation.
I guess you had a lot of support as well around you. It sounds like your family are really supportive. But I was just thinking, like, especially reading the book, and you are a bit tongue-in-cheek about it yourself. Like, some of the ideas that you provide, I know that these sound really hilarious and like really difficult.
Yeah.
But what would you advise, I guess, somebody who has recently been given a diagnosis for their child, is feeling really overwhelmed with everything, perhaps has more than one child or lives in a joint family system, difficult to implement a lot of change fairly quickly? What's some of the advice you would give to somebody in that position?
Okay, so a lot of my clients actually do live in joint family systems. So that is actually a lot harder to change what goes on in the kitchen if they live in a joint family system. So I realized that in those cases, we talk about changing other things first and then seeing a change there before we talk about changing the diet. And we also talk about adding things rather than taking things away. So people find it a lot easier to add kimchi or sauerkraut, like even just a teaspoon or quarter teaspoon into the foods rather than changing the foods and removing food groups or food types. In those cases, we talk about that. But you're right, for people who live in a joint family system, it is a lot harder to change the kitchen. I've also had one client who said that I can't do that because my daughter will just run into next door, which is where her grandmother lives, and she will just go straight into their fridge. We talk about doing other things as well. Alhamdulillah, my family were really supportive, but I think my extended family were quite judgmental.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess there's also the issue of, we are in a cost of living crisis, and I think if you're so used to having a fixed budget for food that buys certain food, if you're introducing other foods like sauerkraut, like quinoa, stuff that is potentially more expensive, that can also impact, I guess, people, and then a sense that you know that there's more you could be doing. But I really like the fact that you said that if there's an area that you can't, focus on something else. And I guess that's the thing. It's about doing what you can, but doing it consistently and doing it for a long period of time and not giving up and not like moving it to the sidelines. It's always about, I think, if you have the knowledge, what can you do in your situation with that knowledge? And you just spoke about how your extended family were quite judgmental. So I am interested in understanding your experiences. You're from a Pakistani family, because I know that there is still a huge gap in understanding and also acceptance of autism in our communities, although it is more prevalent now as well.
Yeah, it is.
What has been your experience of how people have one, related to and treated you and your son, but two, now also as you're trying to change things?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. With my son, there was a lot. I feel like Asian families sometimes they judge first.
Yeah.
In the name of trying to help you. I got a lot of like the refrigerator mum thing. Like I got a lot of you're neglecting your child. This is why it's happened to him. Oh, I had a lot of because my son had really bad anxiety, so he came across as soft. So I got a lot of like, what he needs is one good slap. And that would fix this because you've made him so soft, Taiba. You made him so soft, and it's your gentle parenting. So I got a lot of that, and I got also a lot of if I mentioned the word autism, it was like a dirty word. So don't mention it. Everything's fine. Don't mention that. Don't tell anyone because then they'll start treating him differently. There was a lot of that, but I feel like to free myself of it, I feel like with Pakistani communities, there's a lot of judgment on things that they don't consider to be normal.
Yeah.
But if you look at society, what is normal changes every 5 or 10 years. And you probably even more so is this day and age. So like it definitely was not normal to have a smartphone 10 years ago. But now it's definitely normal not to like it's abnormal not to have one. So once I like realized all these I can't think of the word, but that thing where there's double standards in Asian society, and then you just stop. You have to free yourself from caring about people's opinions, because then later on, when I started making lifestyle changes for my son, I got a lot of judgment on why I'm doing that. You're punishing him. You're punishing yourself by doing all these things with him. Then when everything got so much better, and then he was meeting his milestones, having friends, and then I decided, okay, there's something here that I can help a lot of families with. And part of that is also sharing my own story. I got a lot of, why are you telling everyone everything? Also, I got a lot of, this is Nazar because you put his photo on Instagram to your 90 followers. Yeah, so I feel like with Pakistani families at least, there's a lot of judgment in the name of love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think we all have experienced that in one way or another, unfortunately. Yeah. And I really hope that it's something that changes in our families, because it can have really harmful long-term consequences on people. Yeah. And I'm not surprised that you had frosty reception from people in our community, which it's really sad. And actually what concerns me the most is that I have seen in families where there is clearly a child who is displaying symptoms of autism, or they're struggling. It might just be like a developmental issue or learning disability, whatever it may be. But there is such resistance from families to get support. Yeah. Do you see it changing?
I would like to say I see it changing in the newer generation. So the mums who are millennials, it is changing. But I still find like a lot of millennial mums, especially maybe the ones who are not British, like who moved to the UK, it's still seen as a dirty word. So even though their child's obviously displaying autistic symptoms, they will brush it off. But if you get help earlier, that's when you can make the biggest change and effect for the child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is changing, but it's not, I guess like most things you say, it's not changing fast enough.
Yeah. And I think also so much of Asian family life is centered around food. Any you go to is around food. It's also a lot of people. There's a lot of stimulation, and I get when I go to my family on Eid, I come back and I like crash because I'm so like overwhelmed. If I go to a wedding, I'm like buzzing that whole night because it's just too much. And that's really tough, I think, for anyone, but especially for children with autism. And I guess you as well, because you still want to stop your child from eating certain food or doing certain things. How do you deal with the sense of perhaps feeling alienated or isolated from certain experiences?
I think a lot of people just seem to brush over my experience. as well. If I say, oh, this happened, oh, you're exaggerating. Oh, it's not that bad. You're going over the top. I have a family member whose child has about 12 different food allergies. And she's just she doesn't go read Eid Salah anymore, or go to the mosque anymore, because she said that even though her child has loads of food allergies, and if someone has like food on their hands and touches her skin, she will get a rash.
Wow.
So she said, then it doesn't matter how many times I tell people, don't touch my daughter's face, they will still do it. She's just really had to remove herself from that kind of that part of life, which isn't easy to do at all. But the times that she has had to go to like her brother's wedding, she's really on edge. So I share a similar experience. So I think as a mum, I think how I explain it to other people, like, oh, it's like a food allergy. So if you say food allergy these days, it's taken more seriously. So you can say that. But otherwise, I think people just brush over your experiences. Also, I feel like there's not that much acknowledgement that food is medicine and is a chemical and will cause a biological reaction in your body. So it's it's just chips. You're exaggerating. I think there's a lot of they play down your emotions and your own experiences.
Yeah.
In culture.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of projection generally as well. Yeah, which is really sad. And I'm interested, are you still working with doctors and things as well? And have you found, how do I ask this? Have you found their approach in line with your experiences as a brown Asian woman, or do you feel like it's a little bit difficult to relate to some of the things that they say?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, like, one of my clients recently, as part of my program, she got a methylation test and she got a private blood test done. Not for UK, obviously, with a British doctor, UK trained, everything like that. And then the doctor asked, "Oh, why did you get a blood test done for your child?" And she goes, "Oh, because my child is autism. I'm working with an autism coach, and she's doing these things. And the next thing we do is we're doing a methylation test for my daughter." And the doctor got so excited and was like, "Oh, methylation test, that's so good. I did my fellowship in methylation. I did my research in methylation. It's amazing that you're getting this test for her. Please, can I see the results of the test? Because that was my research project at university and I'm really interested in it." And then she came away and said to me, "Taiba, if the doctors here know about this and they research it, why are they not doing it for autistic children?"
Exactly. Yeah.
And I said to her, I personally think the NHS is very political. If they said this works, then they have to start doing it. So they just don't acknowledge lots of things. So so what she said was, if as a taxpayer we're paying for research at universities, so they know about methylation, but that doctor clearly knows a lot about it, but he can't tell people it because it's not in the NICE guidelines. The NICE is like the National Institute for Clinical Excellence. So like the guidelines of what a doctor is allowed to do. So I feel like there's a lot of red tape in NHS practices where if it's not, so if someone was going to look at a doctor's records to see if there was a complaint, they wouldn't look at, okay, is what he or she done right or wrong, like clinically right or wrong. They'll just look, okay, is what he or she done following the guidelines? So even if you just said something that was right and it's scientifically proven without a fact, like without a doubt it's right, but it's not in the guidelines, you will get called up on it. So there's more of that. So even the doctors that do know about this stuff, they can't say it. And I have friends who are doctors that say, "But I believe in so much, but I can't say it because if it's not written somewhere on the NHS website, I cannot tell patients." She goes, I will tell them at a birthday party. I can tell like at a kid's birthday party, I can say, "Did you try this?" She goes, as like a conversation piece, but I cannot say it to actual patients. There's just too much red tape.
Yeah.
So that's my experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I don't feel, alhamdulillah, my son's really well now, meeting all his milestones. His teacher doesn't even consider him as having SEN anymore. Alhamdulillah, like doesn't have, his one's really good. But so I don't really rely on the doctors for help because when I did, they're really delayed and they're very limited.
Interesting. Do you think there is benefit in trying to do both, in trying to put pressure on your doctors to do what they need to do, because I guess that can help also in putting pressure on schools for additional support. Do you think it is worthwhile trying to do both things at the same time?
I think it's worthwhile because you then get a piece of paper which you need by the system. So it's worthwhile. But if you try and rely on them for actually giving you help, timely help to help your child's daily life, you'll be waiting a really long time. Like on average, it takes 2 to 4 years to get a diagnosis of autism in the UK. 2 to 4 years. And once you get a diagnosis at the appointment, they often just give you a leaflet which says, okay, your child has autism. Here's a leaflet of charities that you can look to for support. There's no attempt to finding out the cause of their autism, or let's see if this works, that works, let's give them proper treatment. There's no attempt. So I think there's value in doing both so that you get a piece of paper. But really, like the school system, the NHS system, everyone knows how stretched they are. Everyone who works in the system can say it's falling apart. So if you're able to help your own child, you're going to help them a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the saddest things is that the sort of the delay in response from the NHS or from doctors in general, that you already are from a family that is not taking it seriously or is trying to mask it or to cover it or to ignore it, that kind of will only make it worse, because it just means that you're not even having this external doctor tell you that and this is important and this is what you need to do. And I guess that if you are one person surrounded by lots of people that are not giving you the support that you need, to not even have that from the healthcare provider, I think is really harmful. But we've seen with your child, but just generally in a lot of cases as well, children make massive progress. And you do say as well that neuroplasticity isn't just restricted to the brain up until the age of 5.
Goes up until age 75.
Exactly, up to the age of 75, which means that we can all in some way rewire our brain. And I find it so fascinating, and I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how the brain can be rewired. Like, it just sounds so incredible.
Okay, sure. So neuroplasticity is the acknowledgement that your brain is dynamic. So it's always changing. It's always changing. So of course, it changes most rapidly in the early years. So an example I often give is if you were trying to learn French, it'd be easier at the age of 5 than at 15. Then it'd be easier at 15 than 25, then at 25 than 45. But even at the age of 45, you can still learn French. So you can still make new connections in your brain. And then I know many adults who have moved, like one of my really good friends, she moved to Switzerland as an adult. And sometimes she's talking to me and she goes, Taiba, I can't think of the word in English anymore. So she because she's thinking in German now, even though she learned German after the age of 24, 25 when she moved to the country. There's an acknowledgement that you can change your brain, you can make new connections, learn new skills, and you can do that at any age. So neuroplasticity is the idea that your brain is dynamic and you can change things. You're not stuck with the brain you have. You can change it to make it work better and more effective. And go for it. I was going to say you can do that through changing your environment, but go for it.
What are some of if we really believe that the brain is dynamic, what are some of the ways that we can keep it active as we get older? Especially in this day and age where, like, watching so much TV, we're just sat there like binge watching series after series on Netflix. And I do sometimes wonder if I am limiting my brain, if I'm stopping it from being as dynamic as it could be, and I'm just sat there consuming this stuff. What do you think are some of the ways that we can keep our brain more active?
What's really easy is that what's good for your brain is the same thing that's good for your heart. And what's good for your heart is the same thing that's good for your lungs and your kidney and your muscles. Healthy eating is a big thing. Like eating like dark vegetables, like a purple grape over a green grape, or a blueberry over a strawberry. So they've got different chemicals inside them. So that also all increases neuroplasticity, and it's better for your brain. And then like spending lots of time in nature is a good one as well. It boosts creativity, gets you out of your sympathetic nervous system into your parasympathetic, and lets you rest as well and calms you down. But also like always continuously learning. So like maybe for you, Samia, mashallah, you read so many books. You read, I don't know, like probably 1,000 books a year. So for you, it's new learning, but it's not like that much new learning because it's something you're always doing. So if you decided to learn maybe like Russian or something like that, or learn tennis or learn knitting, if you're assuming you don't do those things already, then that's new learning for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's something that your brain is not used to doing.
Yeah. That's new learning, and that will keep your brain like active and neuroplastic. And
so one of the things that comes up every now and then is the different ways in which autism presents itself for boys and for girls.
yeah,
And there was at one point this idea that autism is only really is a case for boys. We don't have autistic girls, which we know that isn't the case. What are some of the differences in the way that, if any, is that just a complete myth, or are there differences in the way that girls and boys experience autism?
so the big difference is that girls are more likely to mask their symptoms.
Okay.
So what that means is girls have like better social skills than boys generally. Also, a girl's brain is different to a boy's brain. So a girl's brain is fully mature by the age of 25. A boy's brain doesn't fully mature until 28 to 30. And then we have different hormones as well. Yeah, and it explains a lot, right? Explains a lot. Like I was speaking to a friend about the Muslim marriage market, and I was like, look, a 23-year-old Muslim girl is worlds apart from a 23-year-old Muslim boy in terms of maturity. So, but it's all about brain development. And explained it like that, and she was like, oh, this explains a lot.
Yeah, so my husband is 6 years older than me, and we got married when I was 25, so he was 31. That completely makes sense. We had both fully developed brains just 6 years ago.
Absolutely, literally it. I remember our anniversaries are like, I think they're on the same day, aren't they?
I think so.
Yeah, that's so cool. So yeah, girls are more likely to mask their autism symptoms because they're more likely to mimic other social behaviors. So if they see someone doing something, they're more likely to mimic it. And so that's what masking is. So they may still be like suffering on the inside and having anxiety, but they're more likely to mask it. So one common criticism I get, and I talk about in the book, some people say, oh, you didn't help your son, all you did was teach him to mask. But I wrote that in the book as well, but that addressed that masking. But I don't think that's the case at all, because I don't know if you're familiar with ABA therapy. It's like this autism behavior therapy that's very popular in the USA and other countries, where they will give your child, they'll incentivize them with a reward for doing a certain social, like neurotypical behavior. So like how you would train a pet. If you do this, I will give you this treat. They apply that very similar approach in ABA therapy sort of thing. So they incentivizing the child to stop stimming or use the toilet or things like that. But that's ABA therapy. And a lot of people say that just encourages masking. So they're just learning neurotypical behaviors, which girls can do faster than boys. Even though an autistic child is still having symptoms and everything like that, they just learn these things faster. But with my approach, it literally it's about healing the child from the inside. Not once do I talk about changing behaviors and forcing them to do certain things. It's literally healing them from the inside, changing their environment, and then they naturally change their behavior.
Yeah, because you do write in the book about why masking is so harmful, because it doesn't deal with what is causing the behavior. It's just changing the behavior, and only really changing it in certain settings as well. They then have a complete meltdown or a breakdown or whatever the right word is, because it's not something that they can sustain for a long time. So when they are, I guess, like in the privacy of their own home, I guess for children that would come out in the form of a tantrum. And for maybe like teenagers, it would come out in like in a different way, maybe more anger or aggression or more tears or whatever. And that's really dangerous, because we're not allowing these children or these young people to be present in the world as themselves. With them that they have to be a certain way in order to be accepted, but that way is not coming naturally to them because of all these other things with their brain and the issues with genetics or things in the blood that are not being dealt with. So I find your approach to be like holistic,
Yeah, it is a whole child approach.
Yeah,
it's a whole child approach. Yeah. Okay, so what I find is that in the NHS or in society in general, they concentrate on treating the symptoms and not treating the cause. For example, if someone has depression, they will go to a doctor and the doctor wouldn't there be no attempt in finding the root cause of their depression, which could be triggered by a family situation or grief or a poor diet, lack of exercise, a stressful job. It would just be, okay, here's a prescription to treat your symptoms, and now with this antidepressant you'll be a lot more chipper and you'll be more chirpy, and that will treat the symptom and never the cause. So again, a lot of people with autism, they will have constipation and diarrhea, and the doctors will never try and find out what's the reason for their constipation and diarrhea. A lot of these children are on long-term prescriptions of Movicol, genuinely, like just so that they're not talking about, okay, maybe they've got a food intolerance, maybe they have a gut issue that we can correct to decrease their inflammation and stop, and which is causing the constipation in the first place. So they never talk about treating the root cause, it's always treating the symptoms. And I feel like that when people do that with ABA therapy as well, they think, okay, so that child is stimming, let's treat the core, let's treat the stop them, teach them stop flapping their hands, or teach them how to use a toilet and get out of nappies, which I can understand. But if we talk about the root cause, okay, why are they stimming? There's lots of different reasons, but one, everyone understands it's self-soothing. But if you can do a nervous system test on the child where you can find out if there's any irregularities in the nervous system, sometimes you can just change that and the child would stop stimming completely because they no longer need it to self-soothe, because the chemical imbalance they had inside of them is corrected at their personal biology. So that's treating the root cause and not telling them to stop stimming or replacing it with a new behavior. That's more acceptable.
Yeah.
And similar with ABA therapy, where we're trying it's like encouraging children to mask. It's all not treating the root cause of the symptom. It's just treating the symptom, which isn't really nice for the child either. To just be drugged up or to be forced into, like you said, not their normal self. And a lot of these children, they're so stressed all the time.
Yeah.
It's not nice. I feel like I think the biggest problem really is that parents think there's nothing they can do about it. Parents are constantly living in stress in the home.
Yeah.
And that has a big impact on everyone.
Yeah.
And then if they are given hope that things can change and they're given a plan on how to do that, it can change the whole family dynamic and the whole family life, and you'll be able to unlock your child's potential. It will take the stress out of your home. It's honestly so nice working with clients where they tell me what their child is progressing and doing, like saying words, eating foods. I have a child who is 7 years old and still is wearing nappies, and recently he started to pee in a toilet.
Oh, wow.
Which is like so big for parents. I think a lot of it is like people think that your child is born with it, there's nothing you can do. But if you start understanding autism as a metabolic disorder or as an epigenetic disease, you can change things for the child and just really help them relax in the world and be empowered to be themselves and lead others, inshallah, the whole of their lives.
And I think with your book, I think it is obviously it's great for parents with autistic children because it gives them a real action plan.
Yeah.
I think it would be really good for teachers to look just to get a better understanding of the different things that they should be thinking about and understanding, and maybe thinking about some of the things that some parents could be doing or should be doing, and also like adults with autism or that have had, in your case, like a late autistic diagnosis, because as you've said that like the brain can be rewired up until the age of 75, and that's what we know at the moment. Maybe that will show it's way later. And so I do hope that like more people are inspired to pick up your book. But what do you really hope for anyone that picks up Unlock Autism?
I think, what I would hope for is that the parent feels empowered to make these changes themselves, and they're no longer relying on someone to come help their child. And I speak to parents all the time. If it's not that they're being dismissed by the school or by the NHS system, is they're on the waiting list for help. So I think what I really aim to do is empower parents to help your own child, because everyone wants to be rescued, but no one's really coming. You have to help. If you really want to help your child, you can learn to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a really good book to give you those steps in a really practical, easy way to do that, inshallah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Taiba, thank you so much for your time today. It has been so wonderful speaking to you on the show.
Thank you, Samia. It's been so nice speaking to you too.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow the Diverse Bookshelf on your podcast platform of choice and connect with me on social media. I'd really love to hear from you. It would also really mean a lot to me if you could rate and leave a review, as it helps more people find the show.